was a huge blessing. One of the songs that we sang this evening, was All the Way, and that one means a lot to me. All the way my Savior leads me. That's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight. I work for ADRA International here in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I'm going to share how I came to be part of ADRA, because part of ADRA's story is my story, and part of my story is how God has been leading in my life and how he's been directing my steps and redirecting my steps to lead me to where he wants me to be. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background of how I came to be here. I graduated from Union College 3.5 years ago, and before I graduated, I started receiving various job leads and internship offers, and so I figured that my first order of business should be to figure out what I should do next. I studied a really random major, and I didn't really feed into something direct, and so I really had no idea what I was going to do when I graduated. And so I get home for the summer, and I'm busy sorting through all these different options and trying to figure out what I'm doing, and I really felt like I should have some sort of employment to help pay the bills and my student loans and all these other things that were overwhelming me. And I just felt like I was too busy figuring out what I was doing next to really focus too much on finding a job and doing a whole search. And so I prayed and I said, God, I need a job, but I don't really have time to be working on all of that right now, so I need you to bring the job to me. I'm going to put myself out there, but I need you to open the doors and provide something for me. And within the week, I had a job. And this was just the first of many steps over the next 1.5 years that would prove to me that God was not only working in my life, but that he had a plan for me. And over that summer, I started looking through these different job opportunities, and one after the other, doors started to close. And I wasn't really sure what I should do, and I kept praying about it. And during that summer, I received a call from someone who I didn't even know that well, but who knew what I had studied and what I was interested in, and had told me that they thought I should talk to someone who worked with ADRA, and it was like a friend of a friend. And I thought, well, sure, anything that could help shed light on my current situation and give me some insight on what I should do next would be really helpful. And so I called this lady up who worked for ADRA, and she was very sweet, and she answered all kinds of questions for me, talked to me for like 1.5 hours on the phone. And we kind of stayed in touch after that, but she tried to connect me with an internship, a disaster preparedness program in India, and it just didn't ever pan out. And so later that fall, I received a call from a former professor of mine who had been asked if someone he knew might be interested in going to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And he had thought of me and called to see if I might be interested. And of course, my first reaction was yes, I would be very interested in going there. But my family was very hesitant because it's a dangerous part of the world. And so we prayed about it for a couple weeks, and then we decided to start moving forward because we felt like that's where God was leading. And so I started saving money to get there and pay on my student loans while I was gone, and it was going to take me a while to do all of that. Well, as the weeks and then months passed, it became clear that that's not where God was leading me, and yet again, another door closed. This was the beginning of 2010, and I was very frustrated, and I said, God, I really felt like this is where you were leading me, and I have been focusing all this energy on going here, and now you've closed this door, and I have no plan B. And this was right after the earthquake in Haiti, and a friend asked me if I might be interested in going with her down to Haiti, and she was going down there to do a videography project. And I thought, well, sure, I don't have anything else going on right now, and I think this would be a really good experience. But she was just going for a few days, and I thought, if I'm going all the way down there, I want to stay for a while. And I had no idea what I was going to do there, where I was going to stay, but I thought that there was plenty to do, and I'd just figure out once I got down there. Well, sure enough, I was able to connect with an organization that needed help, and they put me in a leadership position, and I got all kinds of amazing experience while I was there. I ended up staying there for 7 weeks, and one of the director of the project that I was working on was not Adventist, but he was a Christian and very determined to have worship every morning with the team of translators that was working with us. And one morning I was sitting there during worship, and some of the things that he was saying went contrary to what I believed the Bible to say. And I thought, oh dear, what should I do? I can't not say anything because that's the same thing as agreeing with him. So I prayed that God would give me tact. And after he was done with worship, I went up and I spoke to him and I said, I would really love to study this topic with you. And he said, great, let's have a Bible study. And I thought, oh dear, I am not prepared for this. I'm not prepared to have a Bible study, but even less prepared to defend what I believe the Bible does say. And to make matters worse, I had brought a very, very tiny Bible with me that had no concordance, no markings, nothing that might be helpful for me. But when we are at our weakest, God is able to work the best. And as I studied with him, verses would come to mind that were relating to what we were studying and were leading into other things. And pretty soon we came across more and more and more things that we wanted to study that we disagreed on, and this turned into night after night of opening the scriptures together. And it would get late and we'd go to bed, and I'd wake up in the morning with verses on my tongue that were directly relating to what we had been studying the night before. And I really don't know how much this study had an impact on the person I was studying with, but what I do know is that God was telling me that he was going to use me in ways beyond what I could see, in ways that I wasn't prepared for, in ways that I couldn't see at the moment. And I came back from Haiti all fired up to go back to school to study international development. This was my first taste of post-disaster situation, and I knew I wanted to work in some area like that, and so I started making plans to go back to school and get my master's, and everything, was falling into place. I was accepted. I found a place to live. But as the weeks went by and came closer to the time when school was going to start, I just had this great weight on me, and it just became increasingly more uneasy. And I prayed and I said, God, I don't know, what to do. I don't know if you don't want me to go back to school. I don't know if it's the wrong time, but I pray that you will lead me, because I just feel like maybe this is not where you're leading me. And so I sat down with my family and I asked them what they thought. And to my surprise, they agreed that I should not go back to school. And my brother had the crazy idea that I should start a photography business. And I thought, what? I have no formal training in photography. I don't know anything about business. But I thought about it, and as soon as I allowed myself to consider not going back to school, this great weight that had been resting on me was lifted so dramatically that there was no denying that God was speaking to me. And so I said, okay, God, I get it. I'm not going to go back to school. But it still took me about a week to really let go of my plan, because I had made a plan and I was sticking to it. But God was slowly redirecting me and was leading me in a different direction. So now I throw myself into starting a business, which I know nothing about, and I am getting the licensing and the registration of the name and all these things like that. And while I'm in the process of all of that, I get an email from this woman that I had spoken with the previous year who worked for ADRA. And she said, I just came across this job posting, and I think it's perfect for you. And I thought, you know what? I don't know this lady. She doesn't know me. How can this possibly be perfect for me? But I looked at it, and it was exactly what I had been looking for, that I couldn't find, and everyone told me didn't exist. And at this point, I thought it was too perfect, that, there's no way that I'm going to qualify for this job, but I had to apply for it. So I did, and then came the waiting. And I began to stress about it. And I realized that I wanted this job too much. And I had to surrender it to God. And I said, God, I really, really want this job, but I want you to lead me. Well, weeks went by, and I didn't hear anything, and I thought that nothing was happening there. And then I get a call for a phone interview. And I had the phone interview, and they told me if they wanted to hear from me again, they'd call me in a couple weeks. Well, a couple days later, they call and say that they want to have an in-person interview and the following Tuesday and to be there. And so I show up for my interview, and from the beginning of the day, things were just going wrong. And my interview just kept getting scrambled around different times. I had 2 interviews, one with the director of the department and one with the bureau chief. And then the other one was with the vice president. Now, they kept switching them back and forth, and I ended up having the interview with the 2 people first. And it just went terribly. They asked me all kinds of questions that I didn't know how to answer, and then I got pulled out of that one and taken to the other interview. And I came out of the second one. The second one went really well, but I felt like I had just blown it because the first one had gone so horribly. But again, I surrendered it to God, and I said, God, you know what? If I get this job, it's not because I have an amazing personality or because I have an amazing resume or because I had an amazing interview. If I get this job, it's because you are opening the doors for me to be here. And the fact that I had a bad interview, if I do get this job, it's just going to be even more evidence that you are opening the doors and that you are leading me here. Well, a few more weeks went by, and I was contacted and asked if I would be willing to join the team at ADRA International. And I was really thrilled because I really, really wanted this job, but I was extremely humbled because I looked over the last few months and the last few years of my life and how God had been leading and slowly redirecting me, especially in the last year and a half, and leading me to this exact spot. And I said, God, come what may, I can see that you have led me here. And I tell people that as much as I love my job, what I love most is knowing that God led me here. And it has just been a wonderful privilege to work for ADRA because we work all over the world and we help people, and it's just an amazing thing to be in a ministry, in a service-oriented organization, and to see God leading in various ways. And as I looked back over my story, I was reminded of a story in the Bible, in Joshua 3. And in this story, Moses has just died, and Joshua is speaking to the people, and he's telling them that they're needing to cross over the Jordan River. And there's a lot of confusion and trepidation, and what God is really trying to do here is to create a strong faith in his people. And I'm just going to read part of this passage because it's just really beautiful. I'm going to read Joshua 3. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Acacia Grove and came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said to the people, Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, Take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. You shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, When you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. So Joshua said to the children of Israel, Come here and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, By this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Hivites, and the Perizzites, and the Gerasites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man from every tribe, and it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of your feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off. The waters that come down from upstream, they shall stand up as a heap. So it was when the people set out from their camp to cross over Jordan with the priests, bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still and rose up in a heap from very far away, at Adam, the city beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over on dry ground, until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. And it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, 1 man from every tribe, and command them, saying, Take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priests' feet stood firm. You shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men he had appointed from the children of Israel, 1 man from every tribe, and Joshua said to them, Cross over before the ark of the Lord your God in the midst of the Jordan. Each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, What do these stones mean to you? Then you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, which it crossed over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever. Now, my story is nothing as dramatic as the Jordan River being stopped and parted, which I think is even more dramatic than the Red Sea, because there's this flowing river that is being cut off at all these different points. But my story is a memorial of the way that God is working in our lives. Each of us is to retell the ways that God is working in our lives so that we do not forget. Patriarchs and Prophets says on page 484, Coming generations were not to be without a witness to this great miracle. While the priests bearing the ark were still in the midst of Jordan, 12 men previously chosen from each of the tribes took a stone from the river that the priests were standing on and carried it over to the western side. The stones were to be set up in a monument to the first camping site. In the upbuilding of his work, the Lord does not always make everything plain before his servants. He sometimes tries the confidence of his people by bringing about circumstances which compel them to move forward in faith. Often he brings them into straight and trying places and bids them advance when their feet seem to be touching the waters of Jordan. One of the things that reminded me of this story was the fact that God allowed me to keep going in a new direction, and I would start a new direction, and I would just begin it, and he would open a new door. And often God requires us to step forward in faith and move with what we can see, and then he will provide what we need next. And I am running out of time. I wish I had time to tell you about some of the places that I have visited and the wonderful work that ADRA is doing around the world. ADRA, for those of you who don't know, stands for the Adventist Development and Relief Agency. We are working in more than 120 countries around the world. We do disaster relief work and development work. We build wells and do agriculture, provide food, have education projects and microenterprise projects, all kinds of things like that.